Hello, this is Ray Capote for the Misfits Mystique. Cheers and welcome. So we continue to cover this magnificent book by Ralph L. Roberts. It's called Mimosa, Memories of Marilyn and the Making of the Misfits. So Mr. Roberts was Marilyn's masseur at the end of the 50s and early 60s, and it's co-written by Chris Jacobs and Hap Roberts. Jacobs was an IT specialist that compiled all Roberts' material. It's mostly written in diary form. And then Hap Roberts was, and I believe he's still alive, Ralph Roberts' nephew, and they were very close, and they talked a lot about his time in New York and LA and in the movie business and all the different things that occurred in his life. So we left off in January of 1960. Marilyn convinces Roberts to give massages to her husband, Arthur Miller. And Miller was having a lot of neck pain, a lot of stress. He's preparing everything for the Misfits. He's a screenwriter, so he's preparing the screenplay. And they're out in LA at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Roberts gives him some massages, and he was very inquisitive. He asked a lot of questions of Roberts, very nice guy. And he discussed with Roberts how Roberts got to be a masseur, got into acting, and got into the military. So after that was done, they also discussed a little bit about Marilyn. Miller didn't say a lot about her, but he did say how interesting it was that Roberts ended up becoming a masseur by this chance meeting at the Pentagon. And then Miller as well met Marilyn through a chance meeting, first in New York and then in 1947, and then in LA in 1951, and he ended up marrying her some years later. So now we go to the end of January of 1960, and Ralph Roberts, he gets a call from his agent in New York that says, "Hey, I got this great role for you, Ralph. You need to come out." And he goes out there, and it turns out the role wasn't that great, and Marilyn and Arthur weren't too thrilled that he had to leave because they were both benefiting from his massages. So he goes out there and he gets a few periodic calls from Marilyn to see how he's doing, and also Paula Strasberg to see how he's doing and to make sure that he would be ready for the Misfits. Keep in mind, he got a small part, and at the time it was going to be the part of the Indian, where the Indian is just standing on the sidewalk. If you see the movie, it's just a very small part. The actors just walk right by him. It's a crowd in front of the Odeon Saloon when they were going to the rodeo. And he doesn't even say a word. So that's what he was going to do. During these calls to him in New York, Arthur Miller also mentioned to him that, yeah, we're going to give you the part of the ambulance driver instead. You're better suited for that. And that role had at least some dialogue. He, if you recall, he helped Montgomery Clift come out. He fell off the horse and he helped him out, and he said, "Hey, it looks like you got kicked by the wrong end of the horse." And so it was, even though it was a small part, it was a memorable part. And he was on the screen with Marilyn Monroe and with Clark Gable and Montgomery Clift and Eli Wallach. So they were all on the same screen with him. So that, I'm sure that was something very cool that he was able to show his grandkids. And in that scene, he also put a piece of tape on Montgomery Clift's nose, who was playing Perce Howland. And Clift would wear that Band-Aid on his nose for a good time during the movie. So, and he says, in Marilyn, in that scene, by the way, says to Roberts, he says, are "Are you a doctor? You a doctor?" He goes, "No, I'm not a doctor." He's just the ambulance driver. I'm just here to clean him up. So that was basically the whole extent of his dialogue, but it's a lot better than playing the Indian, who in fact they got a Native American to play that. They fast forward really quickly. There's not a lot written between January and April. So we go to April 19th, 1960, and Roberts is still in New York because his agent said, "Look, just hang around here." You know, he had just got done doing a small part on the movie Bells Are Ringing with Dean Martin and Judy Holliday. That's the whole reason he went to LA. So talk about what Arthur Miller said, these occurrences, these chance occurrences in our lives that completely changed the trajectory of our lives. Roberts goes out to LA to do a small part in Bells Are Ringing. Monroe goes out there at the same time to do Let's Make Love. They're both in the same area. And Paula Strasberg, I'm sure, because Ralph Roberts was giving massages to Paula Strasberg, Lee Strasberg of the Actors Studio, their daughter Susan. I'm sure Montgomery Clift, because he was also at the Actors Studio. And they said, you know, they probably called him and say, "Ralph, you know, you're out there. Marilyn can use some massages. Why don't I arrange something for you to go over there to the Beverly Hills Hotel where she and her husband, Arthur Miller, were renting a bungalow. Why don't you go out there and set up some massages for Marilyn?" So that's how his whole relationship with Marilyn Monroe started. And those massages began in November of 1960, and then he continued them in December, and then in January he started doing the massages for Arthur Miller. So on April 19, 1960, Ralph Roberts is in New York. His agent says, "Hang around. You got some tea. You know, the Bells Are Ringing's going to come out to the theaters in the spring, and there's some television show opportunities for you." And so he decided to stick around, even though he wasn't getting much of anything. And he gets a call from the producer of the Misfits, Mr. Taylor, Frank Taylor. And he just told him, "Hey, I've been trying to contact you, Ralph, for weeks, and I just haven't been able to get a hold of you. We're ironing out the situation for the Misfits. We're going to figure out how much money you're going to get paid, and we'll let you know when we get out there to Reno. And it's going to involve you giving massages to Marilyn, massages to Arthur, and hopefully you can give massages to Clark Gable as well. We'll iron the whole amount that you'll be getting for that and how much you'll get for your role in the movie." So that was an important call for him. And again, in his diary, Mimosa, Memories of Marilyn and the Making of the Misfits, that's why they had to hire Chris Jacobs, because there was all these manuscripts. They were somewhat incomplete. There was coffee stains, so he did a terrific job compiling them. And then he even ran them through the computers and did a lot of work there to make sense of all these notes that Roberts had written. So here, we don't know if Roberts had written anything and it got lost, but we're jumping from January of 1960 to April 19th of 1960 when he got the call from producer Frank Taylor, and then we jump over to July 13th of 1960, which is his next entry. So my name is Ray Capote for the Misfits Mystique. Thank you for joining me, and as always, cheers.